Now let's look at Hungary. When people in Europe talk about Viktor Orbán, they talk about a controversial figure. But perhaps that is his strength. He says things that others have forgotten to say out loud. Today, let's look together at some of his teachings delivered in Budapest this week on the anniversary of the Hungarian uprising. There are words about faith, about family, about freedom and peace. And whether you agree with them or not, they cannot be denied a single profundity and courage. All of Europe today is waging a silent struggle over who will raise our children. In some places, it is called modern education, in others, cultural progress. But at the core, it is still about the same thing. Who has the right to instill values in children? Parents or the state? Viktor Orbán's answer to this is quite simple.
And you were the only ones in the whole Brussels snake's nest able to defend your families, to expel LGBTQ activists from schools. You were able to protect your children from ideas and teachings that are contrary to nature and the order of creation. Thank you for that. Today, millions of Europeans from Portugal to Germany to Lithuania want such political power for themselves and
So these were the words of a parent, not just the words of a politician. When Orbán speaks of the order of creation, he speaks of an order that gives meaning to life, the meaning of family, the meaning of education. It is not fanaticism to defend children. It is a natural instinct, but Europe is beginning to lose it. Perhaps that is why so many people are listening to Orbán. Now let's turn to Orbán and freedom. Sometimes freedom takes the form of a manifesto. Other times it is simply leave us alone. Orbán's talk of freedom echoes all the smaller nations that have had to fight to remain themselves.
we ask only one thing, but we insist on it. Leave us alone. Don't give us your crazy dreams. Let us live free. Dear celebrators, we know only one freedom, the freedom of Hungarians. It is ours, and we insist on it, and we have the means to do it. Even if the powers that be or Brussels, which ridiculously considers itself a world power, threaten us, we don't kneel, and we always have a few tricks in reserve.
When I hear these words, it occurs to me that it is not borders that are being defended here, but souls. The freedom he is talking about is not about separation, but about human dignity. It's about the right of man and nation to live according to their own reason, according to their conscience and their faith. This is not closed-mindedness. I think it is a form of self-respect that Europe needs to recover. War. War always begins at the table, not on the battlefield. And in 2025, Europe is looking again. Who has the courage to talk about peace? Orbán has said it fully, even at the cost of criticism.
Brussels has decided to go to war. The countries supporting the war have already formed a war alliance. With inimitable elegance, they call it a coalition of the willing. They are willing to send others to die. They are ready to send even more weapons, even more money to Ukraine. They have declared the Ukrainian-Russian war their own war and thus entered it. They are in it to the bitter end. If Brussels had not obstructed the U.S. president's peacekeeping mission, the war would already be over. Everyone knows that if Donald Trump were president, the war would not even have broken out. And if they weren't blocking him now, there would already be peace. Hungary is on the side of peace. The Russia-Ukraine war is not our war.
Did you hear that? Orbán is saying what more and more people in Europe are thinking. That peace is not achieved by supplying weapons, but by having the courage to negotiate. When he talks about peace, he is talking about what was once a European virtue, restraint and reason. When war lasts too long, it stops counting in casualties and starts counting in money. Orbán reminds us that every so-called great policy, not to mention those of the world statesmen, is ultimately paid for out of the wallets of ordinary.
Brussels has no money, they have no money, but they want to go to war. That is why they want to raise taxes. That is why they want to tax pensions. That's why they want to abolish energy cuts. They want us to pay for war reparations, and that's why they want to push Ukraine into the European Union at any cost. Bring the war to Europe, take the money to Ukraine.
You know, I think that any prime minister who feels responsible for his citizens should be able to say this. Europe is drowning in bureaucracy and in ambitions that are not paid for by those who invent them. Orbán is just a reminder that every war has a payer. And most often it is not generals and politicians, but families. Orbán's speech also often goes back to 1956, the uprising against Soviet tanks. It is a living memory for Hungarians, just as 1968 is for us. And Orbán uses it as a mirror for contemporary Europe.
Hungary stands in the way of the Brussels warmongers v. 1956. Came the stamps today with financial sanctions. Just as then they found their pafikas, today they have Brussels master plan slim fit minions. The good news is that we have a choice. The followers of peace are rallying. In Italy and Slovakia, the wind has turned in the Czech Republic. It is also turning in Poland. The President of the United States is with us, and the country is moving under the feet of Europe's liberal elite. And we are here too. And we are also here. In 1956, Budapest was the capital of European freedom. In 2025, Budapest will be the capital of European peace.
Now that is a powerful image. Budapest as a city of freedom and peace. Two words that once united Europe. Today, they are often juxtaposed. Orbán is saying Hungary is not just a rebel, it is the conscience of Europe. And when he reminds us that the wind is turning here in the Czech Republic, he is paying us a silent compliment. And I privately hope that perhaps he is right. The Christian politician Orbán often speaks of the young, you will note, but not as a mentor, but as someone who knows that if they take and patriotism will not be passed on. They're just words.
But it is good to know that the Brussels Empire doesn't want you to be patriotic. The Brussels Empire wants you to be Europeans without a homeland. It wants you to remain in a virtual world. It wants you to sleep connected to a computer. Time to rebel, dear young Hungarians. You too can be patriots. You can be free and proud Hungarians. But first you must leave the computer.
What Orbán says is a challenge. It is not a sermon. Orbán is not talking about Hungary here. He is talking about a whole generation that is already learning the world from screens, not from life. Words to get rid of the Brussels infusion. It means making her feel everyday reality again, responsibility and solid ground under her feet. It's not just politics. It is an appeal that could and should be heard here. You see, many accuse Orbán of talking about the roof. But sharpish, my friends, that's not hate. That is the emphasis with which the world defends itself. That doesn't want to disappear. Whatever we call him, it is a voice that reminds us that Europe is not an institution, as Mrs. Neruda tries to tell us, but that Europe is a civilization. And a civilization, just like family, faith, or freedom, we are either defending it or we lose it.